Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a topic discussion for Midnight Launch. I'm joined by Robert and Jack. Today we're going to talk about what, in our opinion, makes games bad. Whether it's objective, subjective, what about it makes it bad?
Alright, so I guess we can start by, going around this little internet table, I suppose, and go around saying what games you particularly just thought were unenjoyable or bad, or what games you think other people just thought were terrible, or you've played a game and they've said it sucked, and that word in particular. And I guess we can just start off by that. So, Jack, you want to start?
Oh, shit. Alright, listing of games I thought were really bad. I guess there's a difference between listing a game I think is bad and one I just didn't like. There are games like Morrowind that I fucking hated, but really? I can see that it was a really good game. I can look beyond how much I really didn't like it because I just thought it was too complicated when I was 14. But yeah. But games I thought were just really just shitty. I don't know. I'm really trying to rack my brain for one right now.
Because let's be honest,
quite a while.
It's actually kind of difficult to make a game that's inherently bad by everything that makes it up. I mean, certainly there are bad games, but typically it's from one stance. It's really buggy, or it doesn't work right, or something with the story's bad, but the gameplay's solid, and that is typically how it goes. I mean, an all-around just terrible game.
I can't think of one. Kane and Lynch Dead Men.
Ooh, I heard that was not great.
I got it for like $10, and it was a game that when I saw it on the cover of Game Informer in like 2006, I thought, that looks amazing. I want to play this so bad. And then I finally played it like 6 months ago. And it was just as bad as I heard it was. It was a game that could have had an epic story, and it just crapped something out and called it good.
That was the sequel, right?
Mm-hmm. That was the first one. Dead Men was the first one.
Oh, didn't the second one get bad reviews too?
Yeah, Dog Days got worse reviews.
Wow. Why did they make a second one then?
If it sells good enough.
Oh, true. So, personally, games that I thought were bad, I'm actually the opposite of you, Jack. Morrowind was really enjoyable when I was younger because I always find it's really easier to get into more complicated games when you're with someone. Mm-hmm. So my friend and I, he played it on the PC, and I played it on the Xbox. And he had a guidebook, and he would bring it to school. And, I would borrow it and play through a bit of Morrowind, and we would talk about it at lunch or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then he would play it on PC and do it. And I was kind of driven because we were both, trying to collect stuff and trying to get further in the story. And, follow this guidebook and see where it went. But as I picked it up in later years, I found that being more accustomed to more modern gameplay mechanics, I found it actually kind of hard to pick up, especially on the consoles.
Well, definitely some games it's difficult to start playing them again. I think especially in early 3D games with when they had 2 analog sticks instead of 1, mm-hmm. because people weren't used to having a 3D space with giving the player the ability to control both movement and camera controls. It was usually just one or the other.
Yeah.
And you can go back and look at those, and they just are piss poor. But you can go back to look at Halo Combat Evolved. It's a great game, especially in the time. And you can go back and play it now, and it still feels good, still looks good, still runs well.
I just did a while ago. You're right.
Yeah,
it still plays great.
It still plays amazing, but when we think about when we say bad game, like I said, it's all sorts of stuff. It could be really buggy. It could be that some of the design just makes it terrible. And you can look at a lot of JRPGs. Let's not beat around the bush. Those games, while they have really good visual styles or the actual RPG mechanics are amazing, the way they're played, or the amount of time it takes to really get deep into the game can just drag on and make them just alienate the people who would otherwise enjoy them just because they are created more for the Japanese audience.
Yeah, definitely.
And at that level, it's not necessarily just a bad game, but it's just bad for the people who are playing it. And I guarantee Japanese gamers would look at Fallout and go, I once I leave Vault 101, I'm completely open to do whatever I want, and they might freak out because it's so unrigid. You look at Japanese culture, it's a pretty rigid, straightforward thing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I think another thing is interesting is, if you have a large game catalog to go through, and you kind of just want to, like, experience games. Like, for instance, I have, like, a short list of indie games I haven't beaten from bundles or gifts or whatever, just, like, keys you find on the internet, and you plug in and, like, you get a free game or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they're great because, they're short and sweet, but if you go back and it's, like, Fallout New Vegas, I kind of want to get through this catalog. I kind of want to narrow it down. That's just really hard to narrow down because it's such an open-ended game. It's kind of one of those things that I personally feel more incentivized to play if the catalog is narrowed down a lot and it's just kind of something to just like dick around and just explore. And you kind of have that freedom and comfortability to do it.
There's another thing is that New Vegas is a game that I like it. I do. It isn't that I don't like it, or it's not that I don't think it's a bad game. But it's a game that I can't play for more than about 4 hours at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll pick it up a month later and play another 4 hours. And then the same thing has happened for the last, 6 months.
Why is that?
I haven't even beaten it. I loved Fallout 3. I played the hell out of Fallout 3. And I don't know. I think there was just something about New Vegas that seemed kind of dead to me.
You see, I had like the exact opposite thing. I loved a lot of Fallout 3, and I played the heck out of that game. And when New Vegas came out, I don't think I looked up until, God, I think I got Halo Reach because it came out like a month and a half afterwards. I just played New Vegas completely. And if you want to talk about a bad game, you could definitely say that was a ridiculously buggy game, and then again, then you'd have to get into stuff like, well, there's a lot of variables you have to take into account. A lot of body parts will stay there, items will have to spawn.
That didn't even bother me really.
That's a completely different thing, and that happens with a lot of games. You were talking about in the podcast how I couldn't play Red Dead Redemption because I just couldn't get into it. And, that happens to everything, and is that a problem with the game? Probably not. It's maybe has to do with the person playing.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that New Vegas was not a bad game. It all has to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
I just wasn't quite my thing.
And when you said New Vegas and Fallout 3, that brought up that sequels tend to really can in some cases severely dent or divide a community. Like
I want to touch on this as well. Yeah.
You think about Saints Row 3. That was the game that arguably broke the game into the mainstream. Because before that, Saints Row was sort of like a cult thing that a lot of people played, but it didn't get a lot of traction compared to Grand Theft Auto. And then Saints Row 3 came around, and they just sort of went beyond anything, and they got a lot of traction. But people who were Saints Row 1 and 2 fans were like, well, this just isn't...
This feels like a joke.
This feels like a joke. This doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And arguably a similar thing happened to Fallout New Vegas in sort of a different way, where New Vegas, while a good game, and in my opinion, it was better than Fallout 3 because it wasn't brand new. We hadn't had a game like Fallout 3 in that
really.
Sort of style ever. I mean, you could say Oblivion and Morrowind was like it, but they aren't as similar.
Mm-hmm. No, there's so many differences between those games.
But because New Vegas comes out and it's not the first 3D introduction to the Fallout world, it didn't get received as critically as Fallout 3 did.
Mm-hmm. Well, a big thing for me is what makes it just a terrible game is ability to play it, right off the bat, jump in, feel comfortable playing it. And then another thing that's interesting is, like you were saying, when a sequel comes out, it divides the community. So like we were talking about just a couple minutes ago, when it comes to freedom, it's almost daunting, that much freedom. But in some communities, it's almost like if that freedom becomes limited, then it divides the community even more. For instance, I know when the new Hitman game came out, Absolution, people were like, I just wanted another Blood Money. And Blood Money was a wonderful game, but you kind of have to look at, like, yes, you get a lot of freedom, and you do get, pretty good chunk of freedom in Absolution, but they're also helping gamers get into it more. I know the first, 4 or 5 missions in Absolution, there's definitely a lot of freedom involved, but it's very segmented. You don't get a whole area. Well, you do, but it's segmented. So people were calling it you're not assassinating targets, you're just sneaking to the next door. And there's stuff like that, and same with Splinter Cell when they're like, we're streamlining it, and there was a big break between Double Agent and Conviction, where they streamlined the combat, and they took away some of the sneaking elements, some of the gadgets, and they made it a much faster game. And even though that brings in new players, it also divides it. So people were saying, Conviction is utter trash, and, I really enjoyed Double Agent's missions, the Double Agent's environment. It wasn't chaos theory, but it put a new spin on it while still maintaining the older roots. And I think that's really important because, a game is broken, such as the new Aliens, Combat Marines, something like that, whatever it's Colonial Marines.
Colonial Marines.
Yeah, which from a gameplay perspective, when it came out in E3, I think it was 2011, they hyped it up as this great game. They had a lot of features, but it was entirely scripted, and people were looking for the same thing. And there was a lot of developer issues. There was a big push from Sega to just get the game out as fast as possible. And I don't remember which developer. I think it was Time Box. I think it was. I don't think that's right, but they were just piecing it.
Time Gate.
Yeah, Timegate, and they were just piecing it together last minute. Let's just get a playable game, and I feel like just getting it playable isn't enough. I feel like having a technically good game, good mechanics, just like Halo 1 and Skyrim, just makes a game so much more open to a player base. Whereas even though there's a lot of gameplay mechanics, there's a lot of restrictiveness compared from Morrowind to Skyrim. Mm-hmm. They're still both good games. There's a lot of people who play Morrowind who are just Skyrim sucks because it doesn't have all these things, and there's a lot of people who play Blood Money and they're Absolution sucks because it's not a Blood Money. And
same thing with the Devil May Cry people who lost their shit when this new Devil May Cry comes out, which apparently is still a very good game.
It's not bad. People just don't appreciate, not appreciate, because I don't want to bring up entitlement issues, but they just don't enjoy the direction it went in. And I think Adam Sussler touched on this in his review on Revision 3 Games about the new Sly Cooper game. Yeah, he's great. But he had a review of the new Sly Cooper game, and he's like, this is great, but they didn't really use it to its full potential, and I just didn't enjoy it as much. And a lot of people were like, this is the same thing. It's just not brought up to par. And I feel like with games such as Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2, and people are like, we just want another Dead Space. And Dead Space 3 comes along, and there's a lot of scary elements, and yes, there's co-op, and yes, there's more of an action-oriented gameplay. But
it's still an amazing game.
Yeah, it's still really good, and it still plays really well. The combat is solid, co-op is solid, there's a lot of interesting things they did there. But, I mean, you look at Adam Sussler's point of view on the new Sly Cooper game, and it's they did the same thing, but they didn't expand. And I feel like if there was just a Dead Space 3, and it's let's say you go back to, not the Ishimura, but you just, visit another ship, or you visit another city that's, dark, dreadful, you're not in the action, you're just observing, I feel like people would get bored. I feel like it's important to really develop a series. And I think they're doing well with Splinter Cell. I think it's going in an interesting direction. The gameplay is still, just as tight in the first couple games that, it's not prohibiting you from going back. There's no nostalgia barrier. It's just, they're going in a new direction, and I feel because I've got messages while playing Dead Space 3, and they're like, this game sucks, it's not scary. And it's well, would you like the same game? No.
No, you think there's something to be said for maybe not doing something new, but doing something people have seen before better than anyone's seen it done before.
Yeah.
Something like maybe look at COD 4. First-person military shooters have been done a lot of times, but they've rarely been done that well. And there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for maybe you're not innovating. That's fine. You don't have to innovate a lot of the time. But if you take something that's been done before and you kick its ass, then that can work. That can work really well.
I would say the same thing about Halo 4. I think that when you consider what it was, it's a complete re-envisioning. Like, I described it as it's a 95% of a brand new game. It's characters we know, it's a universe we know, but everything else is completely brand spanking new.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who are like, it's not Halo 3. We just wanted another Halo 3.
Yeah.
Well, Halo 3 is still there. You can still play Halo 3. Developers aren't going to put that many years and that much money and that much, stress and stuff like that into a new game and have it be the same game. That would be so boring from a developer's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, yes, there's a niche audience, but, when you see a new game, and this is the reason, so many sequels do so well, especially in today's market, and they just, keep expanding on, the sales, is because, yes, you get the same formula, but you're not expanding. And, COD has that down really well because, they don't expand a whole lot in, the gameplay department. They keep it simple, and people really like that. But when more strategical games, if they kept it simple, and, well, not simple per se, but if they keep the gameplay mechanics the same, I feel like people would get really bored. Because, if you made another Chaos Theory with up graphics, sure, that would be great, but after a while, you'd get really... I think feel like you'd share, Cecil's point of view and be like, this isn't really expanding, this isn't really using the technology to its fullest potential. You're really just kind of... I don't want to say the word, stalling, but I feel like if you're not, continuously pushing the variant saying, well, what else can we do with Sam Fisher? What else can we do with Agent 47? I
mean, for God's sakes, look at something, going back to Halo 3, can you imagine if they kept all those same gameplay mechanics and you had to still fight over the bubble shield in the middle?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would just be... I got so fucking tired of that kind of gameplay mechanic of, well, we're going to put the rocket launcher in the middle, guess where everyone's going?
Yeah.
The middle.
And that's how every match worked. And I liked it. And I did like those little skirmishes, but eventually it turned into, you knew how every match was going to play out.
Yeah.
Because everyone was going to go toward the power weapon, or everyone was going to go toward the tank.
But it's interesting because you look at games like Counter-Strike. If they change the Counter-Strike game enough, it's not expanding to huge new audiences. People come back because it's popular, they know what they're getting, and they want it to be as tight as possible. If they expanded as much as they did in, like I said, Hitman or Splinter Cell, or I don't know what else, but if they expanded that much in a Counter-Strike game, the community would be like, the new one sucks.
Yeah, they always do it. CS 1.6 and CS Source are always fighting between each other, and I use CS GO, and that's a constant thing. But if we were to get to the subject at hand about bad games, probably the most recent bad game I played would probably be Duke Nukem Forever, which Gearbox seems to have 2 of these games, which is kind of weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard about that. They're kind of wary because, they've made such great hits such as Borderlands, which, if you like it or not, it's still a great game with a very interesting universe and a very, very vivid imagination.
Some rock solid gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And Duke Nukem Forever is sort of like Colonial Marines in that it's the result of a lot of changing of the hands and a lot of stuff being put on the back burner, but Duke Nukem Forever is a lot more extreme in the sense that because it's changed so many hands developer-wise and it's never really found a solid direction, that I would definitely say that this is sort of like a mercy killing, if you would, for Duke Nukem. It's like, all right, let's just end the joke that was Duke Nukem Forever.
Yeah.
So I can only expect that if Gearbox is making a second one, which maybe they are, maybe they aren't, that it will be much, much better.
You could say the same thing about Too Human when that came out.
Mm-hmm.
That's the game I was trying to think of earlier, because that is a game that I can objectively say sucks. Because you couldn't actually target enemies. You just kind of had to slash your way through it.
Mm.
And they really made a big deal about, you have to shoot these enemies before they come toward and explode you to death, and you couldn't actually aim at them. You could just kind of flail around, and that game has made me rage more than any other I can think of. And I only rented the damn thing. I only had it for 4 days.
Wow.
So
I just think there's a very defined line between, communities are always going to bitch about Yeah, no, bitch is the perfect word. Communities are always going to bitch about, like, what game sucks. And I feel like when people are like, this game sucks, not as, like, a cultural, like, not as a cultural word, but just, like, this game sucks, I feel like they're comparing it poorly. They're not looking at what direction the game is going in, where is it going,
Let's not beat around the
how
bush. You're talking about Call of Duty.
Well,
You're talking about
not
Call of Duty. That's the big one that every time one comes out, people are like, oh, it's such bad, it's a terrible game. Dude, Black Ops 2 is a great game, in my opinion at least. The campaign is solid.
Yeah, I did too.
Oh my gosh, that campaign is so powerful. With the story at least was pretty good. I like the fact that they have those little RTS segments. Zombies is always fun, and you have the endless treadmill that is multiplayer.
Yeah.
But
it's just got this really solid gameplay that works.
That works for some people. If someone's like, well, it's not Counter-Strike because it isn't this specific style of gameplay, then, fine. Yeah. Have your Counter-Strike, have your Tribes, have your whatever. Let people enjoy the game that they want to enjoy.
Yeah, it's still, just because, like, I don't go around saying StarCraft sucks because I don't enjoy RTSs as much as I do, like, first-person shooters and RPGs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a solid game. It's got solid gameplay mechanics. The formula works great. And I feel like games that don't evolve a whole lot, that just like find their niche, and they're just working really well at defining that niche as much as possible. Even though it's quite a large one, they rake in quite a bit of cash. I feel like
Legend of Zelda.
And I feel like games that do take the plunge to evolve get a lot of flack because even though their new games are really solid, Absolution and Conviction are solid games. Solid gameplay mechanics, not buggy at all from my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still solid games, and they're not bad. There's a certain enjoyable market for them. But, like, just because they're not the envisionment and the love child of their predecessors, just for, like, simple reasons, I feel like they just get a lot of flack. And I feel like bad games are just ones that are just patched together at the last moment, and they're just not great technically as a game. They don't have, defined objectives that work really well with the gameplay. They don't have solid mechanics, and they don't have, like, solid AI, for instance.
Yeah, good examples, Max Payne 3 and Diablo 3. Hey, do you guys play either of those?
No. Well, I played a little bit of Max Payne 3.
I got a friend who is constantly bitching about Diablo 3.
What about
Well, not constantly. He was very disappointed in it. He thought it was going to be much, much more than it was. He thought it was going to be much more supported than it ended up being. And he just keeps trying to get back into it, and every time he tries, he's just more and more disappointed by it, mm-hmm. and by the community, and by the support from the developer for it.
I mean, do you think he's looking at it from, like, a series standpoint? Well, obviously, because it didn't live up to his, like, Diablo 2 predecessor.
Yeah, that's exactly what
hopes and dreams.
Exactly.
But I feel like, is Diablo 3, coming from a fresh start, a bad game? Or is it more like, you didn't live up to your father's expectations, you are a failure?
And that's the thing I think a lot of people need to look at, is, at what point is this bad because it is objectively bad, or is it bad because it's subjectively bad? Is it bad because it fails at being a game, or is it bad because it fails at being the game you wanted it to be?
Yeah, there you go.
That's
an interesting subject.
That's probably the biggest takeaway you could get from considering games is it bad because it is bad, or is it bad because you think it's bad?
I feel like what if we had a rating system? So I know we're kind of against rating systems here at Midnight Launch, but what if we had a rating system? Well, we talked about it earlier, and we're like, rating systems, I mean, they're helpful, but the actual content of the review itself is, like, far more important.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
I mean, we all have different opinions here, so you don't have to agree. But, I mean, like, what if we had a rating system, maybe out of, like, 10 or 5 or something like that? And so, like, as a successor, so, like, Mass Effect 3 over Mass Effect 2, like, let's say Mass Effect 3 over 2 as a successor. Let's say it's like if you're really unhappy with the ending and you just hate how it betrayed all your choices at the end, what if it was like a 2 out of 5? But let's say Mass Effect 3 is like a standalone, well, even though it's not a standalone, but like you're the first to the series, you're enjoying it without like a Mass Effect 2 save or something like that, and you're like, this is a really solid game. I'll give it a 5 out of 5. And like from that standpoint, and you can do the same thing with like Halo 4, or Hitman, or Conviction, or the Sly Cooper series, like how they relate back to the rest of the series and how they work up by themselves. And I feel like just an objectively just awful game is one that doesn't live up to any hype from the lore or previous games or previous movies or whatever, such as Aliens, and games that are just terrible on their own. So like if you picked up Aliens, Colonial Marines without hearing about Aliens at all, and you're like, this game is absolute shit. It's buggy. It's a last minute thing. I'll give it a 1 out of 5 or whatever. And then like from the Alien standpoint, they have some references in there, but it was just botched together and it doesn't make sense. Like a 1 out of 5, and it's just...
That is clearly a bad game at that point.
Yeah. I feel like if both of those ratings, like if that was an official thing, if both of those ratings, one from the series and one from the standalone, were just like awful, I feel like it's objectively just a shit game.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, in takeaway, I'm trying to wrap it up here. In takeaway, we could definitely say that subjectivity versus objectivity is a big thing to consider when we consider a game as good or bad.
Yeah.
That is probably the biggest thing we could say about this.
Yeah, and definitely back to what I was just saying with, like, if a game fails at both being a successor and being like an individual game, or maybe it fails at one of those, then, it's not a bad game, it's just not exactly what the fans wanted, and it's still, decent.
I think by that standpoint, you would look at, if we talk about, if you want to talk about game-wise and successor-wise, if it's a failure as a successor and as a game, then it's a bad game. If it's a failure as a successor but not a failure as a game, then you have some serious, talking about there, because if it's mechanically a good game, then you can't say it's a bad game. You can just say it's bad if you train the game.
You're disappointed, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And those are very different points.
But if it's shit at being a game, like let's say, I don't know, like a new Bethesda game comes out at release, it's incredibly buggy, almost unplayable, and it's just like a really bad game, but like the content is there, and everything is there, and it boosts it up. Would that be considered a bad game until it got patched? Or would the fact that it was a good successor with content, which I know Fallout New Vegas was, with like the first 2 Fallouts, but it was just really shit and really buggy, and just had really poor like first-person shooter mechanics, and just horribly put out. Would that be considered a bad game?
There would always be people that would be defending it. There would always be the ones saying, well, it keeps the story going. That's great. That's all I wanted. And there would be the other side saying, yeah, but you can't play it because it explodes in your face whenever you try.
Yeah.
And both sides would have points. It depends on what you're going into the game looking for.
Yeah. That's another thing.
That could be said about the War Z, which came out.
Oh, God.
Was definitely a piss-poor game.
Really? Because there's a lot of people who still play it, which is surprising. But is that, like... I know I'm going against the grain here, put on my hipster glasses, but, like... If the gameplay is solid, which it's a little buggy at times... I've never played it, but I've seen quite a bit of bugs. And the free-to-play method is... Or not the free-to-play, but, like, the microtransaction method is broken, but it's still playable, and the community's still playing it, and they're enjoying it, like, casually.
It's playable,
is that considered a bad game? If
but
it's got good
it's
gameplay
still
mechanics?
mechanically broken. It's still a buggy to hell game. And when you look at free to play, you have to consider its microtransaction model in terms of looking at it as a game. That isn't something that you can go, oh, this is this way or this isn't this way. This is something that you have to deal with, because there will be people that will be paying for it.
Mm-hmm. That's
so
true.
that is a legitimately bad game.
Yeah.
On all accounts.
I agree with you. All right, so final thoughts, anyone?
As soon as you said hipster glasses, I just imagined you wearing hipster glasses throughout that entire sentence.
With your fucking pipe.
Yep.
My robe.
I think the best we can take away from this is what I said. Objectivity versus subjectivity. It's not about whether or not you like it. It's about whether or not it's actually a game that's good in the end. That's the most important thing.
I don't know. Maybe that's in the reviewing system I talked about. Maybe we might be able to incorporate that in like future reviews, just to test it out, see how it works.
Huh.
Definitely.
All right,
One for the future.
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the Midnight Launch discussion of what makes a bad game bad, or conversely, what doesn't make it bad. This was Robert, Jack, and Michael discussing it. Thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next time.
Thank you.
See ya.